This is the Science of GMOs. I'm Jessica Eyes, and today we're going to look at the question, why do we use GMOs? And joining me is Dr. Peter Goldsboro, who is a professor of botany and plant pathology at Purdue University. Welcome, how are you?
I'm very well, Jessica, and you?
Very well, thank you. So to get started, I just wanted to ask, why were GMOs developed in the first place?
So when people are developing new crop varieties, could be for a grain crop like maize or soybeans, or it could be an ornamental or a fruit and vegetable. There are certain traits or characteristics that the breeders, the developers are trying to integrate to get into those crops. So, and sometimes those are very difficult to do. And there are some things, some traits that you just cannot produce using conventional plant breeding crop improvement methods. A classic example is a blue rose. So for 400 years, people have been trying to produce a blue rose, but there are no genes in the rose family. There are no blue genes for that color. So you can't produce blue flowers in roses using conventional methods. So an alternative approach then is to find a blue gene somewhere else in another plant or another organism and move that gene into roses to make that particular variety. And that's a trivial example, but that's the fundamental reason why people want to use these techniques of genetic modification.
Okay, so today in our society or in our world, we use GMOs a lot. Beyond, you said that that was the example of the blue rose, but why else do we use them today?
So the main reasons in the United States why farmers grow genetically modified crops is for two specific traits, characteristics, and those are herbicide resistance and insect resistance. And the reason they're used is because these traits that have been introduced into corn and soybeans and a small number of other crops, these traits make it more efficient, more simpler for farmers to produce the crops that they grow. So they may have to use less insecticides if they have an insect-resistant crop, or simpler choices for herbicides, and they may get better weed control as a result of that. So these are tools that have been made available to farmers that help make production of their crops more efficient, in some cases less expensive, simpler. So there's a number of reasons why they've been used.
Okay, and now myself as a regular consumer, do I see any direct benefits because of GMO crops?
I don't really think so, no. With the traits that are on the market that are used now, I don't think a consumer is particularly interested in what specific herbicide was used in their crop. When you go to McDonald's and buy a burger, does it make any difference to you if the animal was fed GM corn or GM soybeans? Probably not. So I think at the moment these traits that are available have very, very little impact on a regular consumer. These are characteristics that are important for farmers and for the companies that have developed them and the seed companies that market these traits. So yeah, the general public at the moment isn't seeing really tangible benefits from these traits. I think in the future that's likely to change, and there are already a few examples of new traits like that.
Where do we see the most benefits around the world, not just here in the United States?
Well, the U.S. is the largest grower of genetically modified transgenic crops. The other countries, so North America, Canada is also a large grower, Argentina and Brazil, because they grow a lot of soybeans and corn. Elsewhere, China has been an adopter of some GM traits. India, Australia, the places where they're not grown primarily is in Europe and in most of Africa too. So the main areas are the Americas and Asia, and where they're grown, and the main areas where they're not grown is Europe and Africa.
So you had mentioned earlier that I, as a consumer, don't really see a direct benefit in terms of, it's true, it's not that important to me what herbicide was used on
Sure.
my, et cetera. But what about if I care about the environment or I care about soil erosion?
Sure.
Are there any secondary benefits involved in using it?
So there are things that you could point to and say, here is a direct benefit, but it's not something that a consumer would really think about. An example of this is, there is insect protected, it's called BT corn, that's widely planted. And one of the reasons to plant that is because there are insects that feed on the ear of a corn plant as it's developing. And when those insects feed, one of the things that they do is they introduce fungi that will grow on the ear of corn. And those fungi can produce really nasty chemicals. They're called mycotoxins, and they're really very dangerous. So by reducing the amount of insect feeding, you get less fungal growth, you get less mycotoxins, and that's a benefit. I mean, that's a clear benefit from using this technology. But is it something that a consumer would expect? No. And again, I don't think it's something that's very tangible, but there are these other, in some cases, small benefits that arise from that.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining me. I really appreciate you helping us to understand why we use GMOs.
You're welcome.